Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. And welcome to this webinar today on protecting cultural property in East Africa, raising awareness of national legal frameworks. My name is Shay Esterling, and I'm chair of the American Society of International Law Interest Group on Cultural Heritage and the Arts. And it's my real pleasure to bring to you today this webinar in conjunction with our co-sponsors, the Antiquities Coalition, who will also be joining us today, which is really fantastic. So today in this webinar, the idea behind it, the primary objective is to introduce East Africa's national and regional legal frameworks and to discuss both current challenges and future needs in addressing the illicit trafficking of cultural property. How we have set the running order today for the webinar is that after my very brief welcoming remarks here, I will hand over to my lovely co-moderator, Helena Rose from the Antiquities Coalition, who will do an introduction for our speakers. Our speakers will then have around 5 to 10 minutes, depending on what we're looking like today in terms of time to introduce their national legal frameworks, so that we all can have an understanding of what those frameworks look like. And then at the end of those presentations, we'll then have a moderated discussion. Helena and I have a few questions for our speakers lined up. And then, of course, we want to open it up to Q&A to our audience that's joining us online as well. And then we'll have a brief close. And so looking forward to this. We have about an hour and a half ahead of us. And I'll go ahead and turn over now to Helena. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Esterling. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. My name is Helena A. Rose, and I am the Director of Programs for the Antiquities Coalition, which is an NGO based in the United States dedicated to combating the illicit trade in cultural property. In this mission, we are so pleased to be joining today's webinar and are so grateful to ASIL, to our speakers today, and to all of you, our participants, for joining. And so without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce the speakers that we have now. His Excellency Abdirahman Abshir is the Director of the Legal and Treaties Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for the Federal Republic of Somalia. In this capacity, he leads the negotiation, review, ratification, and archiving of bilateral and multilateral agreements. And he also advises the government on matters of public and international law. He serves as the ministry's focal point on the United Nations Security Council affairs and plays a central role in coordinating Somalia's legal and policy positions throughout the multilateral process. His work also includes advancing Somalia's engagement with international legal regimes and strengthening international institutional frameworks for treaty governance and compliance. So without further ado, Your Excellency, I'm happy to turn over the floor to you for your remarks.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you also to Dr. Esterling and to all of you. I would like to express my appreciation to the American Society of International Law and the Antiquities Coalition for convening this important and timely discussion. Please do let me know if you may not, if the audio has any issues and whatnot. It's an honor to join colleagues from across East Africa and in the region to address an issue that, while often framed in a technical and legal terms, carries direct implications for identity, for stability, and state building. Particularly for Somalia, the safeguarding of cultural heritage is not limited to the preservation of artifacts or sites. It's fundamentally linked to the protection of collective memory, the continuity of national identity, and the restoration of institutional legitimacy following decades of conflict and the ongoing state building and institutional building that has been going on in the country since 2012. In this context, cultural heritage must be understood as both a legal subject and a strategic national asset. As regards to the constitutional and legal framework for Somalia, Somalia's legal framework for cultural heritage protection is anchored in its constitution, reinforced by constitutional developments that have been ongoing and have culminated in the completion of the constitutional amendments this year, March 2026, and complemented by international obligations, particularly in the provisional constitution of the 2012 framework. The constitution establishes several relevant provisions. Article 31, which touches on language and culture, establishes the duty of the state to promote the Somali language and culture. Article 32 also guarantees the right to express ideas, including cultural expression. Article 27 requires education systems to promote cultural awareness and respect for diversity. And Article 11 prohibits discrimination, including on cultural grounds. These provisions collectively form the constitutional baseline for cultural rights protection. There have also been amendments to the Constitution, to the 2012 Provisional Constitution in 2024, and completed this year in March 2026, as I had mentioned earlier. In 2024, revised chapters introduced more explicit provisions on culture and heritage. In March 2026 of this year, the Federal Parliament completed the adoption of revised constitutional chapters consolidating these amendments. The key strengthened provisions include Article 30 on culture and language, which mandates all levels of government to promote Somali heritage, language, and culture. It also requires the preservation of historical sites and national heritage. It also calls for the development of institutional capacity in cultural governance. It also encourages the establishment of a dedicated national body for cultural development. Article 11 of this amended constitution also embeds cultural rights within the broader framework for non-discrimination and inclusion by prohibiting discrimination based on culture. Article 29 of this amended constitution, which was completed this year, requires education systems to promote national heritage and cultural awareness. These amendments are significant, and I mention them because they move the cultural protection in Somalia from general recognition to explicit constitutional obligation. It also establishes state responsibility for preservation and development, and it also provides a basis for future legislation and institutional reform. At the federal level, given Somalia is a federal system, responsibilities are currently distributed across the Ministry of Information, Culture and Tourism, the Ministry of Education, Culture and Higher Education. There's also the Somali Academy of Sciences and Art, the SOMASA. There's also the National Museum and Cultural Institutions. With that said, as identified in recent UN reports and similar reports, Somalia does not yet have a unified national legal framework specifically governing cultural property. It operates under institutional mandates that are fragmented across different institutions. As for the international legal framework, Somalia's obligations are also grounded in international law. Somalia is a member of the 1972 World Heritage Convention, as well as the 2003 Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention. There's also the ICESCR, Article 15, the right to participate in cultural life with Somalia is legal challenges, of course, persist in Somalia, given Somalia's specific context. Over 3 decades of conflict has caused the country to experience destruction of the National Museum, the theater, the library, There's also been a lot of loss of archives and records. There's been looting and cross-border trafficking and damage to historical and historic urban centers, which all in all have resulted in a loss of documentation, weakened legal claims for restitution, and erosion of cultural continuity. Somalia also presents a case where cultural heritage intersects directly with security, with ongoing threats from Al-Shabaab, which have destroyed religious and cultural sites, prohibited cultural expression in areas that they do control, including, in the areas of music, dance, and art. There's also been targeting of educational institutions. These acts, of course, reflect from their end ideological control over identity and suppression of pluralism. This reinforces that cultural heritage protection is, well, for Somalia, not only cultural, not only legal, but also a matter of peace and security, which is a goal, which is an objective for the current administration and for the government of Somalia as a whole. With regards to illicit trafficking and its legal implications in Somalia, illicit trafficking is facilitated by an absence of inventories. There's also a weak border control capacity, a lack of documentation, and transnational criminal networks, even though they have been severely weakened in the past couple of years. And the legal consequences for Somalia include the inability at times to prove the origin, difficulty in restitution claims, as I mentioned before. There's also the permanent loss of cultural assets, which all in all have brought the need in Somalia for legal documentation systems, clear ownership frameworks, and lastly, international cooperation mechanisms. At current, there are several progresses that are evident in the country with all the developments that are ongoing, including the constitutional amendments, including the strengthened provisions in the constitution, as well as the goals of the government. Somalia has made progress in this area by reopening of the national cultural institutions, the digitization of archives. For example, there's the Radio Mogadishu now. There's the National Cultural Strategy Development as well. And there's also the inclusion of culture in the National Transformation Plan of 2025 to 2029. There's also increased public cultural engagement. And the idea is, at the moment, institutional rebuilding to revive the protection of cultural heritage and rights. Based on the constitutional framework and current gaps, some of the priorities for the FGS, or rather the federal government of Somalia, include the enactment of a national culture and heritage law. Secondly, operationalization of Article 30 on culture and language, the creation of a national cultural inventories and registries, the strengthening of interministerial coordination, and capacity building for enforcement agencies in this area, given that there's a gap and there's been a vacuum in the last couple of years, or rather decades, in the enforcement capacities when it comes to cultural and heritage rights specifically. So capacity building for enforcement agencies, and lastly, alignment with the international legal frameworks on trafficking and restitution. Somalia also stands ready for regional cooperation. Given the cross-border nature of trafficking, regional cooperation is essential, we believe. And some of the priority areas for Somalia include the joint enforcement mechanisms, customs cooperation, and shared databases between the countries in the region, both in East Africa and the Horn of Africa at large, and also legal harmonization. In conclusion, Somalia today possesses a strengthened constitutional foundation, growing institutional capacity, and increasing engagement at the international level. The completion of the constitutional review in March of this year, 2026, marks a critical milestone for the protection of cultural property. The next phase remains implementation, and safeguarding cultural heritage in Somalia is therefore, for the FGS and for the country at large, not only about preservation, but it's about reinforcing the rule of law, restoring national identity, strengthening institutions, and contributing to long-term peace and stability. With that said, Somalia remains committed to advancing this agenda in partnership with regional and international stakeholders. And thank you very much for listening. And I'll give over the floor to Helena. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. We really appreciate that insight into how Somalia is approaching this. It's really interesting to hear about the updates, and we look forward to discussing them more in the moderated Q&A. In the meantime, or next, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Ali Noor, who is a Sudanese cultural heritage emergency response and grants management specialist engaged with the National Corporation for Antiquities and Museums in Sudan, where he serves as rapporteur of the Emergency Response Committee and coordinates initiatives on emergency response, documentation, and advocacy for the protection of Sudan's cultural heritage now during the ongoing conflict. He also serves as secretary of the Sudan National Committee of the Blue Shield, which is under construction, and as a member of the expert group for the ICOM Red List of cultural objects at risk for Sudan. So, Mr. Noor, I turn the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena, and thanks everyone. I don't know, like if I can share a presentation. So that's what I will share. The presentation. 1 minute. I hope this is the one, I think, which is shared, hopefully, like that. So yeah. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Ali Noor, the Secretary for Blue Shield under construction and reporter for the National Corporation for Antiquities and Museums. For the last 3 years, responding to the ongoing cultural heritage crisis in Sudan, and today I just hope to share what the experience that has taught me about what regional legal framework for East Africa must look like. The presentation is more of field documented experience from Sudan, and the object you see in the slide, it's a Nubian gold bracelet. This one is exhibited in Berlin Museum and safely exhibited there, while the remaining collection had not the same fate. It has been looted entirely from the Sudan National Museum. So looking at this piece of art, a masterpiece of art, and imagine the loss that has been incurred by Sudan. So the framework that we will build today or will not build in the coming future will determine the fate of all this entire objects. So we have here 4 parts of this one. Here we have the legal landscape, the Sudan field evidence and framework failures and gaps, and future architecture. Here we talk about, in part 1, covers UNESCO 1970 and also the other conventions. So we can just walk in, and the proposition is very clear. Sudan has shown us happens when frameworks fails, This is not about Sudan being uniquely fragile or its institutions being uniquely inadequate. Sudan had the laws, it had a national authority, it had ratified the relevant conventions. None of it was operational when crisis struck. The looting at Kerma, Merowe, Jebel Berkel, Niala, Sudan National Museum was not random. It was predictable outcome. It it was a predictable outcome of infrastructure that exists on paper but not in practice. The proposition number two, the gap is not ratification, it is operationalization. Most East African states have signed or ratified UNESCO 1970. The problem is that ratification was never translated into the systems that would make it work. Customs training, digital inventories, border controls, bilateral agreements. This is the things that makes it work. We have the legal architecture. We have not built the operational infrastructure. That's my second proposition about. And the third proposition is about Sudan lessons can build the system East Africa that needs. The 3 years of crisis response have generated hard knowledge about what border officers actually need, which trafficking routes are active, which legal definitions are too narrow, and which institutional models survive conflict. That knowledge is directly transferable. That is what I hope this webinar will achieve. Fine. Having that said, we have the 1954 Hague Convention is the foundation of international cultural property law in armed conflict, and it is the instrument that matters most for the situation Sudan is currently living through. Let me dive about why this slide is here. Most legal presentations on cultural property protection in East Africa begin with UNESCO 1970. That is, I think it's a mistake. UNESCO 1970 governs illicit trafficking in peacetime. When war breaks out, as it did in Sudan in April 2023, which is 3 years from today, it is the 1954 Hague Convention and it is 1999 Second Protocol that govern what states and armed groups are legally required to do. And it is the second protocol that makes serious violations individual war crimes. The convention itself is not the problem. All 10 East African states have ratified it, and most have ratified the first protocol. The critical gap is the 1999 Second Protocol. Only Tanzania, Rwanda, and Uganda have ratified it. This means that 7 of 10 states in this region cannot use the most powerful instrument, a mechanism in international cultural property law, the prosecution of individuals for war crimes against cultural heritage. The second critical gap is military doctrine. Ratification of a convention means nothing if military forces have never been trained on its obligations. Not a single East African armed force has a dedicated cultural property protection unit or a military doctrine manual that incorporates the Hague Convention's requirements. This is the operational gap that must be closed, and it must be closed before conflict begins, not after. Sudan experience is the clearest possible illustration. The convention was on the books, the obligations existed on paper, but when the war began, there were no designated safeguarding plans, no marked sites, no military training, and no conflict-ready procedures. The result is documented in the timeline you see in the Sudan field case slide. Well, we go to how these three instruments are designed to work together, because the failure in East Africa is not primarily a failure of any instrument. It is a failure to build the integrated system that The three instruments collectively require. UNESCO 1954 is the wartime instrument. It activates the moment armed conflict begins. Its second protocol creates an individual criminal liability for serious violations. It is grounded in international humanitarian law. Without it, cultural property has no specific legal protection the moment the first shot is fired. UNESCO 1970 is the trafficking instrument. It operates continuously in peacetime and in conflict. It requires states to build the operational infrastructure, which is national inventories, customs capacity, import controls, cooperation mechanism. It is the instrument that most East African states have ratified and most failed to operationalize. We have the UN DROIT that 1995 is the recovery instrument. It fills the gap that 1970 cannot fill. Private law claims in market states. When looted meritorious objects surface at an auction house in London or Geneva, it is this convention that gives Sudan or a Sudanese claimant the legal tool to recover it through a civil court without depending on diplomatic channels. Only Tanzania and Zambia can currently use this instrument. The foundation point I want you to really come forward with me is that three instruments are designed to cover the full arc of cultural property protection from peacetime safeguarding through conflict response to post-conflict recovery. East Africa has ratified most of them, but ratification without operationalization delivery is a legal fiction. The slides that follow will show how these three documents in crisis. Well, let me go through it quickly. Like of the 10 East African states represented here, only two, Tanzania and Zambia, have ratified UNDROIT 1995. Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Sudan, South Sudan, and Djibouti and Eritrea have not. This matters. Why? Because UNESCO 1970 is a public law instrument. It creates obligations between states. But the recovery of looted cultural property increasingly happens through private law, through court cases brought against collectors, dealers, and auction houses in market states. So the UNIDROIT 1995 is precisely the instrument that enables those private law claims. Without it, a Sudanese Shabti or a Sudanese Kushite gold cannot be claimed. So we have April. Let me walk through the timeline of Sudan. In April 2023, war begins, and within weeks, INCOM, which is the government organization, loses direct physical access to more than 60 archaeological sites. Everything we subsequently know about looting has come from satellite imagery, informant reports, and objects that have surfaced abroad. This is what it means for framework to exist only on paper. When the infrastructure is gone, so is your liability to respond. So in late 2023, the first Sudanese objects appear in eBay and Gulf auctions previews. And that happened just 8 months after conflict began. Trafficking routes were established faster than any legal or diplomatic response could be mobilized. The asymmetry between the speed of looting and the speed of law is not a solvable problem after the fact. It must be anticipated in advance. And the lesson of this timeline is not that Sudan failed. It is that the frameworks were inadequate before crisis began, and no state in this region has yet built the infrastructure that would make it adequate. So we learn that any looted objects it surface after 6 years from the incidents of happen. So we have phase one, which is 0 to 6 months. Is this looting is the initial access phase, and when conflict open sites and objects are removed without documentation. We have phase two, 6 to 18 months, is transit and consolidation. Objects move through regional hubs, Port Sudan, Djibouti, overland routes into Ethiopia and Egypt. They aggregate at consolidation points before moving to free port storage in Gulf or Europe. Phase three, where one of the is provenance fabrication. This is the critical phase. False histories are constructed. Objects acquire paperwork. Free port storage facilities are used specifically because they create a legal gap in the chain of custody. With phase four, which is 3 to 6 years, is market insertion. Objects appear in auction catalogs and private sales. By this point, provenance gaps have been normalized and the objects are effectively laundered. Phase 5, which is 6 years or more, is permanent loss. Recovery probability drops below 20%. Legal tools are exhausted, and Sudan is currently in phases 2 and 3 from the initial looting of 2023. And I assume we are now on the transit hubs. So there will be like fabrications of provenance and all this dirty things. We have what we need is really in East Africa, we need operational national inventories. We need red list at every border port. We need expanded legal definitions. We need cross-border intelligence sharing. We need bilateral return agreements, and we need ratification of 1995 UN. So 4 of Sudan's experience, we have the creation of the National Response Committee, and we expect that Regional Heritage Emergency Response Committee can be established as well. ICOM Red List deployment, we hope that we have deployed it in all East Africa, or a unified one that we can have it our own. We have established the Blue Shield National Committee so that it covers all the 4 landscapes of cultural heritage with tangible, intangible, and documentary natural heritage. We built an international network. It was active. Income has made like a lot of partnership and collaborations with we can name Antiquities Coalition, one of our always like supporter partner. So we can take this into phases, which is tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 is the national. We make sure that all our national levels are in line with the international one. So updates of antiquities legalization covering the full cultural property spectrum, and a national Blue Shield committee must be created, an ICOM red list deployed at all ports of exist. None of this require a new treaty or a large budget. They require political will and professional coordination. Tier 2 is the regional layer. This is where the most important new work needs to happen. An IGAD Cultural Property Intelligence Protocol, a formal mechanism for sharing information on trafficking routes, known networks, and objects at risk. A shared digital blacklist, Interpol across member states, a joint border officer training program, a regional heritage emergency response committee modeled like the one we had, systematic surveillance of auction catalogs and online platforms for Eastern African objects. The third layer is the unified with the UNIDROIT 1995 ratification as a regional bloc, bilateral MOU frameworks with market states, the United States, the United Kingdom, the UAE, the European Union, a formal Interpol project data sharing agreement, UNESCO emergency preparedness grants, and cultural property governance. These tiers reinforce each other, a state one, a regional one, and an international one. So in finally, and to sum up this long one, what happened to Sudan may not be recovered, and what East Africa still has can be protected, but only by acting now, which is deploying red list, advancing and advocating for ratification of those who are not ratified, and um, you know what Sudan has lost again, I can tell you that cannot be or maybe not recovered, but through framework systems and legal instruments that this region needs are known. The question is whether we will build them before the next crisis or after it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ali. We really appreciate your insight and this very well designed and very useful PowerPoint, which I hope I can have a copy of. And I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker. Mr. Felipe Alage is a cultural heritage professional from Maputo, Mozambique, specializing in heritage conservation, education, and community engagement. He studied history at Eduardo Mondlane University and pursued a master's degree in heritage and development at Louro University. His work includes curating traveling exhibitions such as The Journey of Our History on Mozambique's liberation struggle, and also collaborating with institutions on Mozambique Island, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. He has also participated in regional programs with both the African World Heritage Fund and the UNESCO World Heritage Center, and also is an author of children's literature and educational publications on heritage, which I encourage you all to check out. So, Mr. Felipe, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for inviting me to this meeting and share a little bit about our experience in Mozambique. As I'm from Mozambique. I don't know, I can share my presentation. Can I?
Please, go ahead. Feel free.
Okay. Don't know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we see it well. Thank you.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So, just to contextualize, Mozambique is located in the southern Africa. Our history dates back to the Bantu expansion, similar to other African countries that their people come from. These people, due to our location along the Indian Ocean, we had early contact with Asian people and were part of the Swahili world. Later, we established contact with European people and were later colonized by Portugal. Mozambique gained its independence in 1975, and Portuguese is our current official language. So English is not my daily language. About Mozambique and the illicit traffic. Mozambique is a signatory state to the 1970 UNESCO Convention, and the country ratified in 1980, and in 1981, Mozambique approved the decree number 10 of 81 that is our basic no, this is on the commercialization and export of culture goods. And the decree focus on goods of nature origin, such as ivory, wildlife skins, precious woods, shells, marine fauna products, and gemstones. Even regarding the handcraft products, it regulates them as a products derivatives of natural resources. There is a significant state intervention, not only in regulation, but also in the commercialization and export of these goods, which in that time were permitted only for through formal process. It was in the beginning of our history as an independent country, so the interest here was more on the goods of natural origin. The law institutes the classification of heritage assets. Once classified, these assets are subject to legal protection. Here I'm talking about the national law that we have now, that is the law 10 of 1880. So yeah, this law is more on the national heritage, and the law also establishes the concept of culture heritage registrations, or tomb. Furthermore, it declares certain assets immediately classified. As those ones, they don't need to have a formal process, such as archaeological monuments and elements, as well as important or locally produces movable heritage property dating prior to 19. For our assets currently undergoing the protection process, the same protective regime applies. And in 1982, Mozambique ratified the 1972 convention, and our national basic law on heritage is based on these two conventions, the 1970 and 1972. Regarding the import and export of culture property, the national law reserves this chapter 6 for this purpose. However, this chapter is quite simplistic, stating only that its regulations falls under the Council of Ministers, and that the export is prohibited only in the case of classified assets. Regarding the trade and use of cultural heritage assets, the legislation allows these activities subject to license and regulation by a state body. At the time, the most relevant institution were the National Director of Cultural Heritage, and that is still working, and the Cultural Heritage Archive, and it works more on the intangible heritage. This legislation, in fact, represents an advancement over previous one by introducing the concept of heritage and regulating these types of assets to prevent their export. However, the regulation focused heavily on classified assets. It means that not only culture property, but particularly on classified assets, leaving others marginalized. Meanwhile, the approval process for inventory remains significantly low, as it depends of Council of Ministers, so it's not working. But recently we have a great advance, as we had a new decree that this one results from all the experience of the country during the year. So this is not only for classified heritage, but it's approach all the culture goods. This statute was approved by the Council of Ministers to address gaps in heritage protection and strengthen control over the illicit traffic of culture goods. Let me underline that we had a problem in the island of Mozambique, where I am, of culture goods that were taken. And of course, we had the law, but one thing is being there in the capital of the country, Maputo, and another one is in the island that is in the north part of the country. There was a company there. So these legislations results on the experience of the country with all these issues. And the key aspect of this regulation is export and import control. It establishes strict rules for the export, permanent or temporary, because the other one had no problems for temporary exportations. And it introduces this idea. The other one is classification. It defines the criteria for an object to be considered culture property. That is, it was very, very interesting. And the restrictions associated with this movement, and introduces also mandatory documents to export specific culture goods as transportation guides, and now required to move this type of goods, especially outside the national territory. And combating traffic, the regulation grants reinforced powers to customs and heritage authorities to inspect and seize goods that do not meet legal requirements regarding their provenance. So here we have not only the Minister of Culture, but we have the involvement of another minister together to combat this. This decree repeals or updates the previous regulation that proved insufficient in the face of culture changes in the culture industry and preservation of our natural legacy. But it's still a challenge. I think it has also only 2 years of implementation, so we cannot say more about it. But we know that they are there, they are doing this work, and unfortunately, many artists now are being affected, because when they want to take their produce so outside the country, it's a real challenge. So that's it that I wanted to present here, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Felipe, and we look forward to hearing more some questions. It's really, really interesting and great to hear about the developments from 2024. But first, we'll hear from our final speaker, who is Mr. Frederick Nsimbambi. He is Deputy Executive Director at the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda, which is the national NGO promoting culture as vital for human development across Uganda's diverse identities. He has over 20 years of experience in cultural heritage, diversity, indigenous peace mechanisms, culture and climate change, gender, and governance. So thank you so much, sir, and I turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Helena. I like the way you pronounce my surname. It's quite difficult to a number of people, but you pronounced it as if you were Ugandan. So allow me greet my fellow panelists and all our listeners. Warm greetings from Uganda. Good evening to you all. As CCFU, the organization that I work for, we are really happy for this invitation to speak to you about the legal framework that is relevant to cultural heritage protection. I've listened to my previous to the previous speakers. They have discussed extensively about the legal framework in East Africa. So for my case, I'm going to focus so much on Uganda's situation, but I'll still present or talk about the legal framework, the challenges, but also implications. So I have a few slides. Let me see if I can share. Mhm. Now, unfortunately, looks like I'm unable to share my screen. Let me try again. Okay, I think let me just speak over my slides so that I don't waste a lot of our time here. So as I was introduced, my name is Frederick, and I work for the national NGO, which is based here in Kampala, in Uganda, and it's called the Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda. So for those of us who have not read about CCFU, we've been in existence for the last 20 years. In May, we are celebrating 20 years of existence. And our main mission is to promote an appreciation of culture that is vital for human development, that responds to our diverse identities as a country. Because as a country, we are culturally diverse, more than 65 ethnic groups and 45 languages, with a population of over 46 million Ugandans. So as an organization, we implement our program activities through three main program areas. One program area is focusing on cultural heritage safeguarding. And this is where we work with schools to promote heritage education. We also support community museums across the country. We promote the conservation of the environment using cultural approaches. And we're also involved in climate change interventions from the cultural perspective or using indigenous knowledge. And we also promote the safeguarding of historical buildings across different cities. And then in our second program area, we focus on cultural rights promotion and protection, because as a country, we are culturally diverse, as I said, but of course, out of the so many ethnic groups that we have, Some groups are very small in number and they don't have opportunities to express and enjoy their cultural aspects or cultural rights in public spaces. So as an organization, we go out there and build their capacity to express and enjoy their cultures in public spaces, but also document their oral histories and promote their indigenous languages. And then our third program area focuses on managing cultural diversity. So as an organization, we look at cultural diversity as a source of wealth, as opposed to being a source of conflict. So we promote dialogue, we promote exchange of knowledge and information, and also our traditional cultural values. Because if you come from one part of Uganda, there is quite a lot that you can learn from people from the other parts of Uganda. So basically, that is what the Cross Culture Foundation is all about. And as a country, we have a rich and a diverse cultural heritage and also natural heritage in terms of historical buildings, in terms of sites, in terms of our dressings, in terms of our language, in terms of our food, and so on and so on. And as the previous speaker said, this cultural heritage is, of course, categorized under tangible and intangible. But the most prominent ones, we have 3 World Heritage sites inscribed under the 1972 UNESCO Convention, and that is Kasubi Royal Tombs, and Rwenzori Mountains National Park, and Bwindi Forest, where we have the mountain gorillas. Actually, half of the world's mountain gorillas are found in Uganda. So that is what makes Uganda unique. And under the 2003 convention, we have 6 intangible cultural heritage elements inscribed on the UNESCO list. And of course, the elements include, skills to do with backgrowth, the Mpako naming ceremony, music instruments, and so on and so on. In terms of the legal framework that is relevant to cultural heritage safeguarding in Uganda, we have different legal instruments. Of course, some are we have them at national level, but we also have them at the national level. At the international level. So at the international level, we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, especially Article 27, which talks about cultural rights, and that has been integrated in most of the national legal instruments, especially the 1995 Constitution. Then we also have the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights of 1966, which also talks about cultural rights in Article 15. And that has also helped us a lot as an organization to promote the cultural rights of different Ugandans, but also be part of the international conversations under the Universal Periodic Review Mechanism for human rights. And as an organization, we take lead actually on the National Coalition for Cultural Rights. We are responsible for developing the status report on the implementation and realization of cultural rights. And our report feeds into the alternative state report, which is presented in Geneva every after 4 years. We also have the 1972 convention, which I've just talked about, the UNESCO Convention concerning the protection of the world culture and natural heritage. And under that convention, we have the 3 World Heritage Sites listed. I've also talked about the UNESCO Convention. We also have the 2005 UNESCO Convention on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions. Unfortunately, Uganda has ratified all these conventions. When we come back at the national level, we have the 1995 Constitution, which is the basis of all other, legal instruments at the national level. And specifically, Objective 24 and Objective 25 of the Constitution provide for the protection of our cultural heritage, but also empowers all Ugandan citizens to participate in the protection and promotion of their cultural heritage. We also have the Museums and Monuments Act of 2023, and the processes of developing this act started in 2017, and the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda was very key in developing this act, and it repealed the 1967 Historical Monuments Act. So what is important for CCFU in terms of this new legislation is that the previous legislation did not recognize the existence of community museums. But as we talk now, the new act recognizes the importance and role of community museums in terms of protecting and promoting our intangible cultural heritage. And also the law provides for the protection of special sites and also national heroes, but also it promotes public-private partnership, because we realize that the protection of our heritage cannot be a one-man's game. It needs partnership, it needs collaboration and networking. And there are certain aspects of our heritage that require government people coming in, but also the private sector coming in. We have the 1959 Uganda National Culture Center Act, and this act provides for establishment of cultural centers and national theaters across the country. Unfortunately, since 1959, we've not had any regional theater or cultural center. We only have one that was established immediately after the passing of this act in 1959, and that is the National Theatre based in Kampala. So this is something that we've been talking about with government to ensure that, because Uganda is such a big country, not everybody has access to the National Theatre in Kampala. So we've been advocating for regional theatres to ensure that all Ugandans at least have a right to access or spaces where they can go and express their cultural peculiarities. Of course, we have other laws like the Local Government Act of 1997, which was amended in 2002, and it provides for opportunities for local cultural resources to be protected, promoted, and developed at the local government level. We recently we've had the Traditional and Complementary Medicine Act of 2019, which also provides for the promotion of our indigenous medicine. So as we talk now, because previously, before 2019, and it was very difficult for people to recognize the role of indigenous medicine. And yet, as far as the national statistics are concerned, 60% of Ugandans still depend on indigenous medicine. But this is something that wasn't recognized under our laws. But as we talk now, we are happy, and we were part of the processes that led to the passing of this act of 2019. What else? We have the Witchcraft Act of 1957. It is the oldest legal document that is related to cultural issues in Uganda. And this is something that was passed by the colonialists, because for them at that point, anything to do with our traditional ways of healing and managing our health-related issues was very unique. And because they wanted to promote their Western way of treating people, so whatever they couldn't understand was branded witchcraft, and that law was put in place just to imprison people who were involved in traditional healing. And unfortunately, we still have this this act in in our laws, in as much as it doesn't make a lot of sense as we talk now. And then besides the legal instruments, we have institutions that are meant to promote our cultural heritage. First and foremost, we have the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities. And under this ministry, we have the Department of Museums and Monuments that is responsible for promoting museums, promoting sites and monuments, and carrying out research and documentation of the different sites and monuments. We have the cultural institutions. In Uganda, we have cultural institutions and kingdoms, and they are very powerful in terms of promoting culture and cultural heritage. And we have the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. And under this ministry, we have the Department of Culture and Family Affairs. And this is where most of our intangible cultural heritage is being promoted. But of course, as an organization, we've been trying to lobby or advocate for a centralized hub where different cultures can be promoted, because it is not it's not possible to have aspects of tangible heritage being promoted or talked about in a different ministry, and also aspects of heritage being promoted through a different ministry. As an organization, we've been asking government to harmonize these two departments so that we have one coordinating hub for all aspects of our cultures, because tangible, they are always inseparable. They move hand in hand. Yes, so in terms of challenges, of course, we still have a challenge of encroachment on the different cultural heritage sites. People have encroached on these sites, whether they are government or private, because all the sites are located, somewhere in a physical space, and land is such a precious item in Uganda. So we've had a lot of land-related issues. Land grabbing is a serious national challenge, and some of our cultural sites have fallen victims of land grabbing bonanza. Then we have limited funding for the restoration of sites. The 1970 Convention on the Prohibition of Illicit Trade in Cultural Objects is not yet ratified, and that makes our work quite challenging when it comes to following up cases of illegal trade in cultural heritage objects. And as an organization, we have this on our to-do list to advocate for the ratification of this convention. And then some laws are rarely applied, as some of my previous speakers have said, because it is one thing to ratify the legal instruments, and it is another thing to have them applied. Because if you just sign the paper and you are not trying to mainstream the provisions of these international laws into our local laws, they remain in books. And as an organization, we've been trying to advocate for not just the ratification, but also the operationalization of these legal instruments. Then we have limited awareness about the existence of these legal instruments. Many Ugandans are not, unless they're in the culture sector. Those outside the culture sector, they care less. They have limited information, limited knowledge about the existence, but later on the importance of these legal instruments. And most importantly, we don't have lawyers specialized in cultural heritage protection. The lawyers we have in this country are socialized or oriented in different aspects. But for the years I've been in Uganda, I've not heard of any lawyer who is specialized in cultural heritage. So if we are talking about implicating people who violate our cultural heritage laws, I think it is high time we started thinking about training lawyers specifically in the cultural heritage field. And then as lastly, the lack of a ministry of culture. We used to have this ministry in the 1970s up to I think around 1986. So when the current government came into power, they took away this ministry. So since then, we've not had a coordinating hub for issues of culture. And that makes the implementation of the different legal instruments very challenging, because you need to have a government, a central government hub that will oversee the implementation of these legal instruments. But as we talk now, the different aspects of our culture are scattered and in different ministries, and that makes it very challenging to follow up the different cases and issues related to cultural heritage protection. Yes, I think that's what I prepared to share with you. Apologies, I tried to share my screen, but it couldn't work out. But I hope I've been audible enough.
Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate it. It was really interesting. I think from our organization standpoint, we believe that the protection of culture is not just a cultural issue, but it's also important for human rights, for national economies, and for national security, international security. I think we've heard that across all the presentations, which have all been so interesting. I really appreciate the time of all of our speakers that they took to be with us tonight so late in the day, and I'm really looking forward to discussing further. I'd like to invite the audience to please, if you have a question, you can place it in the Q&A, which is down at the bottom of your screen. And in the meantime, Dr. Esterling, if you have a question, I'm happy to turn it to you.
Yeah, I'll use my moderator privilege if that's okay while we're waiting for some questions to come in the Q&A box. So one thing I wanted to ask, and this is to any or to all of the speakers, is I just keep going back to and thinking about our current situation that we find ourselves in terms of polycrisis. So thinking about things like climate change, conflict, and in particular the I think the real challenges that we're starting to see to an international rules-based order increasingly. And I was just wondering, again, to all of the speakers, your thoughts on challenges to particular difficulties in relation to the protection of heritage and the management of heritage in the face of this sort of polycrisis that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
If I may, I would say that thank you very much, Doctor, for the question, and it's all about mobility and and you're like how fast you can react to the incident or to the event. So I think that a kind of like a task force frameworks that it been invoked immediately, because now we see that how crazy the world had become. So like you cannot be like a firefighter going here and there and trying to you like to put off the fire. Instead, as also Dr. Frederick from Mozambique said that yeah, even in national level, the awareness is not quite raised, or people are not taking it seriously. So on national level, there should be that those bodies like specialized task force that they can directly approach the government with certain things. And then that's all I can think of, like this kind of webinars that brings together people from East Africa, because it's same trafficking routes, it's gonna be the same network one way or another. So better that we have focal points. We have like focal points immediately. We have task forces that can be deployed immediately, or take care of certain emergency. That's thank
Okay. I think two things I can say here that can easily be done. I think one, we need to think about disaster risk management when it comes to cultural heritage protection. We need to anticipate all these disasters and civil wars, and we ask ourselves, in an event that there is a war, let me say in Uganda, are we ready to protect, or how will our cultural heritage properties be safeguarded in an event of a civil strife or in an event of a war? So for me, thinking ahead is very important, and having disaster management strategies in place. But also, and one of the disaster risk management strategies is research and documentation, because the people in the cultural heritage sector, in many cases, they are less concerned about the wars and so on. Wars are generally they are generated by different category of people. But for us, what we can ably do within our means is research and documentation. In an event that a particular cultural property has been destroyed by war, at least we should have a record. And in case we want to reconstruct, we want to rebuild, there is a point of reference. In 2010, Kasubi, here, the royal tombs was burnt completely by somebody. Up to now, we've not been able to establish who burnt the tombs and for what reasons. We've not. 15 years down the road. But what helped the situation was that a lot of research had been conducted, a lot of documentation. And Kasubi has been completely reconstructed, and it looks beautiful. So we were able to go back to the archives, we were able to go back to the previous documents, and we looked at how Kasubi used to look like before, and it was reconstructed basing on the images that we had. So research and documentation is very important, but also having disaster and risk management strategies in place is very key.
Thank you both. And maybe for our other two speakers, I'll try to sum up some of the other questions in the chat box in our final minutes, along with a question that I myself had, which is, many of these international conventions and even the conversations about them, including this one today, are happening in English. And sometimes English doesn't capture the same concepts as other languages or vice versa. Of course, across the region and even within your own countries, there's diverse, linguistic diversity. And how do you approach ensuring that key definitions or aspects of the law are consistently understood and applied across institutions and communities? And I think this speaks to a question in the chat. Has anyone used the model law on the protection of cultural property and heritage prepared by the African Union? Is this something that has been useful? And could a Pan-African approach support the development of a shared infrastructure that doesn't rely on conventions that maybe don't apply, accurately in this region?
Good afternoon to you all again. Thank you, Helena. Thank you also to the listeners and for engaging with us here, and also to the panelists. I think it's been wonderful presentations. Particularly, I think I liked Ali Noor's presentation, visually speaking, at least. It was very well done. I think I would add in his list of East African countries, perhaps you could add Somalia, given it's not that far from Sudan as well. If I may address the question about the deteriorating international rule-based order and what could be done in this in this regard. What we're seeing or rather a move towards more regional cooperation, more bilateral cooperation. We're seeing when it comes to specifically for countries like Somalia, where documentation is incomplete and where you have objects that have already entered the international market. Cooperation is not an option. It's the only option at times. So what we see in our experience is a strengthening, at least bilateral and regional agreements on restitution and mutual legal assistance, and also development of shared databases and provenance systems. And lastly, standardization, and I think this could touch on your question at the moment, standardization of evidentiary thresholds for return claims, because without these legal recovery mechanisms will remain weak, and and at times likely impossible. So thank you very much. I'll give the to the rest of the panelists.
Please, Mr. Noor, you have your hand up, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency, Abdirahman. And Somalia, indeed, it was in the presentation, but just I was running out of time. But Somalia, definitely, and there is no way that we can combat anything without having Somalia on board, given its geographical and heritage components. So having Your Excellence here as Director of International Treaty, I would come forward with a clear proposal that we, Sudan and Somalia, can have a bilateral agreement right away. We don't have to wait for anyone to tell us when to do that bilateral agreement. So I extend and sincere request to you so that we can move forward and develop such agreement that can be even having the capacity to include others who might want to join. It should have this kind of room. Yes, that's it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Felipe, please.
Okay, thank you. Just I didn't hear quite well the questions that Elena made, but I because of my internet. But I saw here about the Pan-African approach. Definitely, I think a Pan-African approach could obviously support the development of shared infrastructures and for culture property. And I think we already have the beginning of this approach. We have the agenda of the African Union, and it reinforces the role of culture. And it's important how the culture is understood there in this charter. So I think the governments of Africa, we have to take this agenda and really implement. And another question was on the climate change. The will come from the community. I live in an island, the island of Mozambique, and you can imagine we are affected by those issue of climate change. We have cyclones every March, every year. So, but we know that the solution is within the community. So we have to go there and sit with the community and learn with the community to implement the solution that can be useful there. And another issue that I think my colleague Frederick mentioned was about the capacity building. In fact, it's one of the areas that we must reinforce capacity building. Regarding the lawyers, in particular, I was invited to give a trainer to lawyers on the heritage issue. And all those things that we were talking were new to them. And some of them, they told me, oh, you know, if someone comes there in the courts and represents a problem of someone stole a chicken, and another one telling me that, oh, I have problems with my building regarding the historical issue, of course he will resolve the problem of chicken. So the capacity building is very important, very, very important. Thank you.
Mr. Frederick, please.
Yes, so I just want to add my voice to that of my colleagues when it comes to the Pan-African approach. I think, as we said previously, in terms of paperwork, we are fantastic. In terms of walking the talk, that is where we have a problem. So when these leaders of ours go to the AU, when they go to Addis Ababa, everybody is talking nicely about cultural heritage preservation, how we need to safeguard our heritage. But what are they doing back home in their countries? Because it starts from home. I want to be challenged by my colleagues from Sudan and Somalia and Mozambique. Is there a government that is going to allocate, or is there a government that is already allocating 5% of their national budget to culture? I have not known any. In my country, the percentage is not even measurable. So if we are not doing it right at home, how are we going to do it at the continental level? So I think for me, the starting point should be the Pan-African approach should start from home, from our national governments. We should advocate for adequate budget allocation to culture, and from that we shall upscale it to the continental level. When it comes to climate change, it is the same problem. I see a lot of Ugandan government officials jumping on the plane, going to attend COP27, COP29. Now we are preparing for COP, I don't know what. We go to benchmark, and when they come back, they do nothing. Okay? And we forget one thing, that when we speak about climate change, some of these approaches must be contextualized. As Felipe said, we need to work with the community. Climate change mitigation measures that are rooted in our cultures, but we don't pay attention to those because we are increasingly getting disconnected from culture, and anything that that is culture is seen as being backward, being satanic, and so on. And in that process, we've lost the indigenous knowledge that is really, really useful when it comes to addressing effects of climate change. I've been lucky to conduct research in different parts of Uganda on the role of indigenous knowledge in addressing climate change effects. And if you get on our website, there are lots of publications that are profile that knowledge. But the challenge is that that knowledge is not mainstreamed in the contemporary climate change approaches. And if that knowledge is not mainstreamed, then it's not going to be used. It's not going to be utilized. So we need to walk the talk. If we say our indigenous knowledge is important, then we must provide opportunities for it to be utilized. If we are saying we need to use the Pan-African approach to safeguard our heritage, let us start from home. We need enough money because these days, without money, you can't do much. And our governments are not prioritizing cultural-related issues. They are prioritizing military, they are prioritizing other things and so on, purchasing guns and so on. I think we need to get back on the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Frederick. And thank you to all of our speakers on behalf of the Antiquities Coalition. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our time, but this has been really interesting. I really appreciate everyone's time. And Dr. Esterling, I will turn it to you to close. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I just want to reiterate, thanks to all of our very esteemed panelists. I've learned so much, and I have so many more questions. I know there's many more questions online. Hopefully, we can keep this dialogue going. Thank you very much to ASIL. Thank you very much to the Antiquities Coalition, and thank you also to the audience. I wouldn't be here kind of without you guys. And yeah, I think just to sum up what we've said here today is that it seems to be the theme is think globally but act locally, and rather than being reactionary, plan ahead, try to get ahead of the game in relation to this. So focusing on things like actually operationalizing what's there on the ground already. So a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll end here.
Thank you very much, Sterling. Thank you very much, everyone. And Helida,